Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on this Facebook Live. My name is Glo Choi, and I'm going to be your MC for the evening. I work for Hana Center, which is a proud member of the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, or ICIRR. And ICIRR and its members have been fighting for immigrant rights at the federal, state, and local levels for decades. Some of our victories here in Illinois include the closing of ICE detention centers, the expanded earned income credit, the new child tax credit, and of course, the temporary visitors driver's licenses way back in 2013. These wins have been only possible because of the people power and organized immigrant communities coming together to advocate for the needs of our families and neighbors. We're hosting this Facebook Live today to celebrate another huge victory, which is starting July 1st of this year. Standard driver's licenses will be available to any Illinois resident who's been eligible for a temporary visitor's driver's license. This is a huge change, and we want to make sure that our community is informed about it. And before we talk more about this change, we wanted to highlight and talk about our champions in the General Assembly who helped make this possible with our people power. And those two individuals are Senator Ram Villavalam as well as State Representative Barbara Hernandez. They were both the lead sponsors of this bill, as well as our strongest elected allies in Springfield. So we wanted to give them a huge shout out because we wouldn't have been able to do the work without the strong leadership of those two. So we wanted to thank them so much for their leadership. And before we talk more about some of the ins and outs of the driver's license changes, what we wanted to do is to share a story about the importance of this and the impact that it's going to have on our community. And there's no one better to do that than someone who's directly impacted by it. So now I have the great pleasure of welcoming Eddie Cardiel, a community leader with us at Hana Center, who's going to be talking about what it means for him to now qualify for a standard driver's license. What's up, Eddie?
Hi, Glo. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eddie Cardiel. I currently live in Naperville, and I am a leader with Hana Center in Chicago. I immigrated to Illinois when I was 3 years old and have been living here for 29 years now. I have been using a temporary visitor's driver's license, or a TVDL, since they became available in 2013, and was relieved that I no longer had to worry about getting pulled over and possibly getting arrested. However, having a TVDL came with another barrier. Despite the license having my full name, my date of birth, my address, and other personal information, it is not considered a form of identification here in Illinois. This made it challenging for me to access basic services. It was the stripe, purple rather than red, that made it difficult for me to do something as simple as opening a bank account without having any other forms of identification. It's moments like those that can lead TVDL holders to feel different from others based on their immigration status. While other people are able to open a bank account easily, we have to face an additional barrier to do the same thing. I know that other people with TVDLs, for example, those that don't speak English well, or those that are not able to explain why their ID card has a different stripe, feel more vulnerable to discrimination each time they show an ID card that puts out their legal status. That's why I joined Hana Center in Springfield last year to advocate for driver's licenses for all, and I'm excited to replace my TVDL with a standard driver's license once they are offered by the Secretary of State next week. It's great that people like me will now be able to drive, open bank accounts, access other basic services with just a single valid identification card. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Eddie. And I think it's really wonderful to see that, when we organize, we win. And this is a prime example of that. We can transform our lives and our community's lives. So thank you so much for sharing your really powerful testimony, Eddie. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. And as you all know, starting July 1st, standard driver's licenses will be available to any Illinois resident that was eligible for a TVDL or temporary visitor's driver's license. And here to talk more about that is ICIRR's Senior Policy Counsel, Fred Tsao. And he's going to be giving us an overview of how we got here, as well as the transition process from TVDL to standard license. Afterwards, he's going to be answering audience questions. So please share your questions in the chat. So take it away, Fred.
Okay, thanks, Glo. Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Fred Tsao. I'm the Senior Policy Counsel here at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrants and Refugee Rights. And yeah, if we can go to our slide deck and get that set up. Okay, so yeah, so this, the new driver's license law updates a law that we passed 10 years ago. ICRR and our member organizations won temporary visitors driver's licenses, or TVDLs. This was a huge victory for immigrant communities that enabled hundreds of thousands of people to get licensed, get tested, get insured, and drive safely. However, we quickly realized that there were some problems with TVDLs. They weren't perfect, but as time went on, the problems that we knew TVDLs had became more apparent. So bear with me here. Sorry. First off, TVDLs could look different, and they could flag a person's undocumented status. And then as Eddie noted. And as a result of that, people cannot use them for various uses that one could use a regular driver's license for, whether it's picking up prescriptions at a pharmacy, or signing up kids for programs, or even setting up a bank account, or accessing other services. And then finally, there are various privacy and concerns regarding TVDL data. And specifically, ICE could identify someone as having a TVDL through certain state databases, and just knowing someone as a TVDL could be a marker that someone could be subject to immigration enforcement. So next slide, please. Okay, so while this was going on, the states started implementing Real ID. So this is a federal this law in 2017. It's not fully in effect yet. It won't fully go into effect until next May. But as the state was starting to implement this law, it created Real ID compliant licenses. Now, these licenses are valid for federal identification purposes, like boarding airplanes or entering certain federal facilities. Unfortunately, it's only available to U.S. citizens, people with green cards, and people with certain other immigration statuses. Now, while the state was making these Real ID licenses available, the standard licenses, the non-Real ID licenses, were still available. And these were available to anybody who did not have a Social Security, or who did have a Social Security number, because they are not, they're not valid for federal identification purposes. And you see they are marked as with federal limits apply. And actually, I'll show this on the next slide here. Okay, so on this slide, you see on the left side, that's the temporary visitor's driver's license, and you'll notice it's marked with a purple stripe saying TVDL, and it also says, not valid for identification. In the middle is the non-Real ID license. So that has a red stripe. It says driver's license, but it's also marked federal limits apply. So basically, you can't use this to board an airplane or enter certain federal facilities. And then at the very left is the Real ID license, which has standard license in two different ways. First off, there's a gold star that marks it as a real ID. And then it's also not marked with federal limits apply. So this can be used to, for federal identification purposes. So next slide. Okay, so what the change that's happening with the new law is that instead of people getting TVDLs, people who don't qualify, people would instead get standard licenses if they otherwise qualify for a TVDL. So what that means is that if someone does not have a social security number, which had been a requirement for the standard licenses before, if they have a social security number, they can get a standard license if they do one of two things. If they have a temporary visa, they can use that to get a standard license. If they do not have a temporary visa, then you have to show that you've lived in Illinois for 1 year, and you have to provide a validly issued passport or consular ID. Now, one change that's happening now is that with this new law, the Secretary of State will start accepting expired passports or consular IDs so long as the document has not been expired for more than 2 years. So any document that's recently expired within the past 2 years, you can use that if say you're having trouble renewing your passport or consular ID. So, and again, noting that standard driver's licenses are valid for identification purposes, but not for federal ID purposes, again, like boarding airplanes. So next slide. Okay, so this law also addresses many of the data privacy and data protection concerns that we had. So for instance, so first off, documents regarding social security numbers and immigration statuses are confidential. So what that means is that if an immigration agent wants to get information about a particular driver or motorist or driver's license holder, that immigration agent needs to provide a valid criminal warrant, a subpoena, or a court order. They can't get the information any way else. Also, if the then all parties to that agreement have to pledge or have to agree that they will not in turn share that data or use that data for immigration purposes, and they cannot share it with anybody who will. That includes ICE. Okay, and then finally, people who do not provide a social security number are excluded from automatic voter registration, which should cut down the likelihood that someone who is not a citizen and not otherwise eligible to vote would be mistakenly registered to vote through the Secretary of State's office. So finally, next slide here. How do you get a standard driver's license? So if you have a temporary visitor's driver's license, you can hold on to that license if you want to. But the whole point of this law is to make sure that people can get a standard and do it fairly quickly. So there's good news here. First off, if you can go to any Secretary of State facility to apply. Back when when TVDLs were available, you had to go to only certain facilities. This time around, any Secretary of State facility can issue a temporary visitor's driver's license. And you see on the slide here, and we'll post in the chat the link to find a facility near you. So if you have a TVDL, you can switch over, and you can switch over even before the TVDL is expired. So if your TVDL is about to expire, if there's less than 1 year left on it, you have to renew the whole license. So that includes a $30 fee. You get a standard license. Also, if your TVDL still has a good long time left on it, you can switch over to a standard license by paying a $5 replacement fee. So again, you do not have to wait until your TVDL is about to expire. If you are a new driver, if you never got a TVDL to begin with, you can go through the regular process to apply for a standard license. This means you have to be 16 years old or older. You do still have to pass a road test, a written test, and a vision test. And you need to show the documentation that would be required. Now, again, if you do not have a Social Security number, and many of us do not, you can either show, if you do not have a Social Security number, but you do have a temporary visa, you can show the temporary visa. Do not have a visa, you still need to show 1 year of Illinois residence, and you need to have a validly issued passport or consular ID that's either current or that is within 2 years of expiration. Now, we are expecting the Secretary of State to announce certain other steps to make this transition a bit easier. So stay tuned for more announcements, more information. We will have more information posted on the ICRRR website, which is icrrr.org. And also the Secretary of State will be posting more information as well. So with that, let me turn this back to Glo.
Thanks, Fred. Yeah, thank you again for going over this critically needed information. A lot of changes happening, a lot of questions to be answered. And that's exactly why we're transitioning over into this section where we're going to be answering your questions. And if you haven't already, please do share your questions in the chat, and we'll answer as many as we can for the next about 10 minutes or so. So if we can we have the first question up from the community member with first name, I think, Diane. So the question is, if I have my TVDL, what do I need to do to get my new standard driver's license? Do I need to make an appointment for renewal?
Okay. Thanks, Diane. Again, if you have a TVDL now and you want to switch over, if your TVDL has less than 1 year left on it, you do need to renew, and you need to go to a Secretary of State facility, and you have to pay the $30 renewal fee. The Secretary of State, some of the exams, probably not the driving test, but possibly the written test, and everybody needs to retake the vision test. So that's the renewal process, and many Secretary of State facilities are requiring appointments to go in. However, if you still have like a year or two left on your TVDL, you should just be able to apply for a replacement of for the TVDL, in which case you would get a standard license. And we understand that the Secretary of State is setting up a process to make that easier to do. Okay.
Fred, before we answer any more questions, we actually have a surprise guest, our very own champion of this law, State Senator Ram Villavalam. So, okay, actually, he might not be here. Okay, so maybe we will answer another question until we find out if he's back or not. Oh, okay, I think he's back.
Okay.
Please hold, folks, while we get our technical things going on. Senator, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for putting this important discussion together and for having me be a part of it. I also want to thank the whole coalition for their work on this to bring us to this point. As the state senator that has sponsored this legislation, I'm incredibly honored. However, it's because of the organizations that are putting this event together that pushed us to get this bill signed into law. We are here today. And this is just another step. I truly believe another step in the steps that we're taking as a state to being the most welcoming state in the nation. I am so proud of this legislation. It really does, one, remove a stigma that immigrants face and have faced among the many stigmas that they have faced over the years that they are here. Nobody, no immigrant, no person should feel discriminated against, should be forced to feel different because of who they are. And that's what having a TVDL did to people. In addition, though, it served an important step in removing barriers, removing the obstacles, the difficulties for people to access critical services, whether it's prescriptions or renting apartments. These are basic functions, basic parts of our lives that everyone should be able to access without fear, without discrimination, without extra work. Right? We all know that people are working, trying to take care of their family, and there should be an easier way for everyone to access the critical services that we all need. And so I am so proud to have sponsored this legislation. I am so glad that there are organizations like ICER and HANA and so many others that are doing the work to make sure everyone is educated on this new law. And I will certainly be celebrating and helping raise awareness about this law come July 1. Again, as a son of Indian immigrants that came here in the 1970s, I know about the discrimination. I know about the barriers of language and digital and transportation, and we all need to work to make those barriers, those discriminatory acts go away. And that's what we're taking one step with this legislation, and that's why I'm so proud to have been the Senate sponsor and to have worked with you all to get to this point. Thank you so much, and I look forward to continuing the fight to make sure we are the most welcoming state in the nation.
Thank you so much, Senator. It's so heartening to know that we have champions like you that are standing alongside with us, fighting alongside with us to ensure that all community members can participate fully in their daily lives. And we're going to go ahead and continue answering our Q&A questions. So folks, please continue adding those questions in the chat. And even if we run out of time, we're tracking all of those questions and we're going to try to do our best to answer them. So yeah, please go ahead and continue asking those questions. And can we have our next question coming up into the screen? Okay, a question from Edith. Can I travel with a standard license?
Okay. Okay. So standard driver's licenses should be honored in many other countries, for that matter. If you choose to travel, you may not want to, but yeah. So these are standard licenses, just like anybody else would have. So you can drive around across the country with the standard license. Unfortunately, the thing that you cannot do with it is board an airplane. When you get your standard license, be prepared to take some road trips. Unfortunately, as of May 7th of next year, when Real ID kicks in completely, you would not be able to use a standard license to board an airplane.
Thanks for that, Fred.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, from Yesenia. I'm trying to make an appointment at the DMV.
Mhm.
What would be the option that I have to put to apply for my driver's license to be the standard driver's license now?
Okay. So, yeah, so again, it depends on whether how long you still have left on your TVDL. If you are replacing a TVDL that has more than a year left on it, actually stay tuned for more news from the Secretary of State's office, because there should be a process starting up where you might not even need an appointment. However, if you are set for renewing your entire license, then you would need an appointment. Well, you can go to any Secretary of State facility, but again, many of those facilities do require appointments. But as I understand it, there should be those appointments should be pretty plentiful, and you should be able to get an appointment pretty soon.
That sounds great. Looking forward to doing that myself. All right, next question, please. All right, from Jessica. Do we need an appointment for a replacement since it's not maybe more than 1 year till expiration?
Okay. So again, stay tuned for an announcement from the Secretary of State's office regarding a process to make it easier to get a replacement without having to make an appointment and go into the facility.
That sounds good. All right, next question, please.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, this is a great question. What are the federal limits of a standard driver's license?
Okay. So the whole point of these federal limits is to make sure that certain people don't get into certain places where they purportedly can create problems. So keep in mind that Real ID was passed a few years after 9/11. So of course there was a lot of concern back then, and probably still is concern about boarding airplanes. So much of the point of Real ID and the most significant limit imposed by Real ID is being able to board an airplane. So only certain documents that meet the standards of Real ID, including Real ID driver's licenses, can be used to board an airplane. The same happens to certain secure federal facilities, military bases, nuclear power plants, other kinds of higher security places. Now, this does not apply to all federal buildings. So, for instance, if you need to go to the federal courthouse, or Social Security office or things like that, then they won't necessarily card you or ask for an ID. But for other places where there may be more of a security risk, those are subject to Real ID requirements.
Thanks for that, Fred. So 2 takeaways I have is you cannot enter a nuclear facility and you cannot enter a plane using a standard driver's license, amongst few other places.
Yeah. So
Okay.
starting next May.
Noted. All right, folks, if we can get one more question here. Another one. Do you have an estimated time of when to stay tuned to get more information?
Okay, so great question, Yesenia. So this law takes effect next Monday. We anticipate, the Secretary of State posting lots of information and making additional announcements next week. If not necessarily on Monday itself, then sometime next week. So. Yeah, and once that information hits, we ourselves at ICR are going to blast that information out ourselves.
That sounds great. So we don't have to stay tuned for too long, at least regarding this, because it's coming out very shortly. Okay. There's another one. Can Hana Center or any of the other organizations would be so kind to do local workshops to explain more of the differences between Real ID and the new driver's licenses for immigrants? I think that's a great question and something that we can certainly discuss more about within our own respective organizations. And I don't want to speak for Fred, but is there something you'd like to share on this question?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, we are preparing our own fact sheets and pages on our website, and I think we want to make sure that this law succeeds as well. So that's why we're having this event this evening, and I would imagine we'll be doing further events, to explain what this law is and explain the differences between a standard license and a Real ID license. And just make sure that folks know you can get a standard license now, or a standard license or a standard state ID.
That's right. Not everyone drives, but everyone deserves to have a license. All right. All right. Well, thank you, Fred, so much for your presentation, for answering all of these questions. And we know we weren't able to cover all of the questions that folks were asking, but be assured that ICIR staff will work on answering the questions left in the comments over the next few days. And as Fred shared, you can qualify for a standard driver's license or a state ID if you don't have a social security number, but you can show a valid visa or show that you've lived in Illinois for at least 1 year and presenting a foreign passport or consular ID. Just one caveat that the passports or consular IDs will also be accepted if they are expired up to 2 years ago. And while this is a significant win, we know that there are still many community members that are being excluded. And so ICIR and its member organizations are going to continue fighting for them. And I invite you to sign up using the link in the chat right now for updates on opportunities to get involved with our push to ensure that everyone in Illinois will have driver's licenses. In other words, driver's licenses for all. And additionally, if you want more information about the new driver's license bill and standard IDs or state IDs, you can go ahead and visit icirr.org/drivers-licenses. And that page is going to be updated as additional resources from the Illinois Secretary of State becomes available. So yes, stay tuned for more information after July 1st. And that being said, I just want to thank all of our presenters for the information that they shared. And I also want to thank everyone here that joined us for this information session. So thank you. Thank you all so much. And we're really glad to have done this presentation tonight. So have a great night, everyone.